Success and Disappointment, page 53. Glenn is a young, enthusiastic deer hunter who I first met when he booked a sika hunt in New Zealand and, while answering the call of nature, was successful in shooting a sika stag. This time he had chosen to hunt the sambar, an equally difficult animal. He no doubt found the means of transport to the sambar country a lot slower and rougher than flying into the ranges of New Zealand in a Hughes 500 helicopter to hunt sika deer. It did not take long to arrange our sambar camp and boil the billy for a brew, after which we started hunting by heading upstream to see how much deer activity had taken place on the flats. Light rain was falling, but not bad enough to dampen the enthusiasm, so we persevered with the wet scrub. I was copping the worst of it. This is one of the disadvantages of being the guide. There was good deer sign on the flat, but it was all a week old. The gullies were holding water, so I thought the animals might be giving the river flats a rest. As I began to tunnel under an area of tea tree to check out a wallow, my first interesting discovery was a very heavy cast antler. As the antler had moss growing on it, I did not like my chances of finding its mate, but I had to have a quick scan in the damp to almost mucky understory. Glenn helped me look, but to no avail. A check of the wallow also revealed nothing. We finally emerged from the tea tree, and it was a relief to be able to stand upright again. I informed Glenn that we would cross the river and check the mouths of a few gullies, as one might be worth hunting in the morning. By using a tree that had fallen over the river, we were able to enjoy the comfort of dry feet, something that was rare in the early days. Trying to keep your feet dry was not even thought about then. Walk them dry was my brother John's motto. Walked down through the second gully, we found fresh hind and stag tracks. The smell from the shiny black pellets told me the deer should be in the gully somewhere. There was insufficient time to hunt the gully, and the rain was setting in, so it was back to camp to crank up the fire. At least the rain would wash our scent from the gully, giving us a better opportunity in the morning. It did not take long to heat the stew, and even less time to devour it. Glenn and I had a chance to reflect upon our New Zealand sika deer adventure while enjoying the open fire. By morning the rain had cleared, and the day showed promise as we contoured around the face leading to our hot gully. For some reason, nearly all our hunts involved walking up hills. I suppose the lie of the land had something to do with this. As we stalked through several smaller side gullies, we could see where the deer had been. As with most hunts, it was not that difficult to find an empty sambar bed. Big question. Going on other hunts in this gully, my theory was they might be above the main junction in either the left or the right branch. After Glenn and I gained sufficient height above the junction of the two main gullies, we slowly stalked along a wallaby pad until we had a good view into the right branch. There we sat for a while. I find these rest periods one of the most enjoyable parts of sambar hunting. This not only gives the feet a well-earned rest, but also one can take in all the nature has to offer. The large variety of bird life, spectacular mountain views, and the colour of many wild flowers seen at the turn of spring, pushing their way up through the rocky ground. On this particular day, we witnessed a large yellow dingo meandering around a face 200 metres above us. Looking through our binoculars, we could see he was a very healthy predator. I believe these elusive canines to be just as cunning as the sambar. In all my years of sambar hunting, I would have only seen a few dozen mature wild dogs, and shortly after the dingo vanished, Glenn and I focused our conversation on what might be hiding in the gully below. Glenn said it would be a nice thing to take home some meat. There has to be something in one of these main gullies, was my reply. We had only covered 40 metres after our break when Glenn secured his first sambar deer. Two hinds ran up the face of the gully floor, giving him an easy shot as the smaller of the two animals stopped. This is not a common mistake made by a mature stag, and a shot may have been taken while the animal is on the move. It was not an easy task breaking Glen's hind into manageable portions on the steep mountain face, and after the gut bust to get the venison back to camp, I suspect Glen will not be in a hurry to shoot another SAMBAR hind so far from camp. Glen would now concentrate on trying to secure a stag, and I knew the whereabouts of one such animal. The best way to get a crack at this particular stag would be for us to split up just before entering the area where the animal had spent most of his daylight hours. There was a nice wallow in this gully and plenty of cover with deer beds approximately 150 metres above the wallow. I had put the stag out of this area more than once. On this occasion I had the secret weapon with us, my German short-haired pointer dog Snow. The plan was to release Snow after giving Glen plenty of time to get into a position on the ridge above the thick bedding area. I kept Snow on the lead until I passed the wallow, and I assumed that by this time Glen should be high enough to perhaps see some action. It wasn't long after I let Snow off the lead that she started to voice. She bailed the stag for a minute or so, and then the animal was heading in Glen's direction. Shortly after, while I was crashing my way through thick cover in the gully, 2 shots rang out. Once I was on the ridge, the going was very easy following the game trail. As soon as I met up with Glen, I knew the bad news. Snow was still voicing well down in the main creek. At this point, I had suspected Glen had most likely hit the stag too far back behind the shoulder. He said the animal came running past side on at only 25 or 30 metres. The tracking process was on as we ran down the main creek, then upstream again trying to catch up with Snow. We had no other options. By the time Snow returned, she was puffing and panting like a steam train, and I was doing quite a bit of heavy breathing myself due to running up and down the gully. The events were not adding up correctly. Glen said he was sure he hit the animal with both shots from his .30-06. I decided to go back down and look for any sign of blood where the stag had first made it into the creek. Following the splayed out stag spoor, I managed to locate the odd spot of blood. After a while, it became clear that the stag had crossed over fresh hind tracks, and in doing so threw the dog off the scent. Snow then followed the hind's tracks up the gully and took us with her. It was a painstaking job tracking the animal through the thick growth that covered the gully floor. I marked the trail with toilet paper, and just as well as I lost the mark several times, forcing me to backtrack to the paper. The trail led me down to the mouth of the gully. However, with darkness now taking over, I was unable to see the trail, so I marked the location with the intention of returning in the morning to follow it up. Glen had been looking for the trail up out of the main gully and would be back to camp by this time. On my return to camp, Glen had the fire cranked up and the black kettle was on the boil. As I enjoyed a hot Milo, I informed him the search was not over yet, but it was not looking good. The stag had covered way too much ground and was not losing blood, which would make it more difficult for Snow to find the animal. The night brought with it a little rain, and this did not help the situation. Luck was about all we had left, was my thought, as we headed off in the morning to resume the search. In spite of the rain, I found the trail, and it led us down the gully, over the road and onto the river flats. This area was thick with mountains of blackberry, prickly coprosma and bracken fern. You name it, and we were stuck in it. After a couple of hours zigzagging and tunnelling under the SAMBAR hunter's favourite prickly vine, we decided to accept defeat and return to camp. As always, I was most upset with the outcome. Bullet placement is imperative in any hunting, and often a large caliber rifle is not needed. The following summer I returned to the area and waded the river on the off chance of finding a set of antlers, but I had no luck.